I'm so excited for today's episode. This topic is a hot one. We are going to talk about 5 tips for effective collaboration so that you can do interdisciplinary practice with teachers, teaching assistants, parents, occupational therapists, with physical therapists you work with. This is going to be very important if you work with children with autism. You don't want to take a monotherapeutic approach in which you're just using one type of therapy. And that's because autism is a multifaceted condition. This is what I'm seeing a lot of right now in this field is a lot of bandwagon interventionists who jump on a particularly therapy approach when they're treating children with autism, and that's all that they do. Now, I would say buyer beware. If you come across a person and they're able to say, I am this type of therapist, I would run because autism is such a multifaceted condition that you need to have a multi-therapeutic approach. That is what's really neat about having colleagues work with you who have their unique skill set. And I like this quote from the Stoic philosopher Seneca, because this is how we want to approach autism when it comes to your colleagues, both private and in your setting. Okay. And that is, we are waves of the same sea, leaves of the same tree, flowers of the same garden. When it comes to treating children with autism, we're all taking a different approach. We're all unique, which is fabulous. But we're all waves moving in that same ocean of progress. Respect these differences because these differences are going to be beneficial for the children with autism. Let's look at these 5 C's. These are 5 core tips that you're going to want to follow if you want to be successful at collaborative relationships. I didn't give you any of the abstract terms when I was reading all of this research this summer, and I read mounds and mounds of research on this because I'm putting together this workshop for my CIS members. And I read books on this, and they had all of this fluff, little do's and don'ts tips when it comes to collaborative practice, which is small potatoes that are not going to impact the groups in any sort of way. I wanted to take the flowery concepts such as mutual respect, trust, support. So all of these abstract concepts, it's almost as if someone said justice, peace, love. It's like, what do you do? What do you do? I'm digging through this research, looking for some step-by-step frameworks, some processes. I'm looking for how do you take these abstract gobbledygook, flowery language and put this into practice? I mean, it was really just one article after the next. And I probably have gone through about 50 peer-reviewed articles on how speech pathologists can work with other professionals. And it was all gobbledygook. So there's no cutting and pasting and saying, I'm going to share this with the CIS members because it's like, what can I do with this? But what I did is I took that research and I took that with my 20 years of experience as well. So I've been doing this over 20 years and I've been collaborating and doing groups with teachers, with occupational therapists, with teaching assistants. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to do it with physical therapists. Anyhow, let's get onto these 5 C's. These 5 C's is what we're going to want to focus on in order to create change. CC. All right. So I'm getting really C heavy. This is that good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these 5 C's. And I first want to start with the one who I think is most important, and that's a clear mission. So they've said before, if you're an Olympic coach and you want to be successful, ask the question, is this going to get us closer to a gold medal? And if it is not going to get you closer to a gold medal, don't do it. And if it is, do it. But that's going to be the litmus test. When it comes to these groups, you need to be clear on that mission. For instance, if I'm doing a movement group in which we're using the CIS movement activities and we're dividing and conquering, I'm doing one CIS movement activity and the other teacher's doing another CIS movement activity. What I want is our mission to be the same. The mission that we've decided upon typically is that the children are actively participating in a meaningful and joyful learning experience. Because at the preschool level, what we care about is emergent learning. We care that children love learning because we know that children that love learning are going to go on and learn more. And the more that they engage in learning, the higher their skills will develop. We want to create lifelong learners. If I'm working with an occupational therapist or physical therapist, their goal might be that they achieve goal-oriented behavior, which is very challenging for many children with autism, in which they're using their body in a complex manner to solve problems, to achieve goals. This is a pivotally important skill in order for later pretend play skills to develop. And this is a hallmark area of difficulty. That's why task-oriented movement therapy activities are so important for them. Every single week when we have that 20-minute group, the question is this helping us achieve our mission statement, which is that the children are actively participating in meaningful and enjoyable activities that are task-oriented movement in nature? Yes, we're doing the right thing. We're going in the right direction. This is our mission. If it doesn't help with that mission, we got to get rid of it. It's fluff. Just cut the fat. We only have 20 minutes. Everything we do, everything we say is going to move us in that direction. Number one is a common mission. That's the first C. Number two, consistency. So when you put that weekly group in, you can't think of that as an elective. You can't think of that as this is not IEP or this is not insurance covered. We'll do it some weeks. We won't do it some weeks. It's just some add-on because consistency counts. And the reason consistency is so important is that you want the children to be familiar with the routine. And our children with autism, many of them have sensory issues. And when you have sensory issues, you don't feel safe if your sensory issues so are compromised. What you don't want to do is changing the routine every week, or you have a group 1 week and then you don't have it for the next 3 weeks. That's not routine. That's not a familiar routine that's going to help them feel safe, in which they can easily follow it so they can focus their efforts on participating. They can focus their efforts on the target skill. That's what we want, and that requires consistency. This is your tiger time. You're going to like this C word. You protect that like your cub. No IEPs during that time, no therapy during that time, no meeting with the boss for the meeting of minds meeting, which used to be your evaluation meeting, but we changed it this school year. None of that. No, this is tiger time. Every week, unless there's no school, we're going to have our group and it's going to be at this time. It's going to be on this day and it's protected because consistency counts. Number three, we're going to have a clear routine. I love Google Docs because everyone gets in it. They get to make it changes. This is a shared planning, creating, editing sort of experience. Every 5 minutes are accounted for. Every single time we are going to rinse, wash, repeat. We're going to do the same thing every single time. The children not asking, what are we doing? Where am I supposed to be? They're going to know that part. You're going to be present. The child's going to be present. That's when the magic occurs. It's all about interaction. So we have that routine that is always going to stay the same every single week. It's a clear routine. This is how we start the group every single time. We start the group every single time. We have the letter of the week. We have objects that start with that letter of the week. They pull it out of the feeling box. Then after that, we have our music and movement activity. It's from the Google Slides activity from the SIS membership. Then after that, we get into another hands-on activity. It's always the same every single week. Now, of course, what we're doing is the same, but the materials we use change because we know that diversity is the spice of neuronal life. but we're going to keep that routine the same. We have a very clear routine. However, we don't stop there because it's not fixed. We always want to grow. In every single therapy session, I always ask, how could I have done this differently? And that is the key, is that as a team, we're always asking, how can we DSD? How can we do something different to make it better, to make the learning experience better, to make the gains better? We have that Google Doc. We just change the color and you put in your ideas of how you can make it better. Then when you get together, you talk about those ideas and you pick one thing. You don't change 10 things. You pick one thing that you want to try and you do one thing differently. DSD time. And if it works, it works. Doesn't, it doesn't. You go back to the original way. But that's how we're going to change. We're going to make it gradual because we don't want to turn their world upside down. These are children that have sensory issues. Sensory keeps us safe. These are children that have anxiety because many of them don't feel safe. And they're not going to feel safe if you totally change up a routine on them. We try one thing to do something different. That's how we grow and that's how we get better. The last one is number 5. This is co-teach and conquer. Instead of having that teacher or teaching assistant or that parent that you're working with or the occupational therapy working assist you run the group or you assist as a teaching assistant, you want to divide the students so you can take advantage of the unique skill sets that you each bring to the table. For their SIS membership activities is I have one SIS membership activity and the teacher I'm working with is doing the other SIS membership activity. We are dividing the children equally so they get more direct one-on-one face time. We're all taking on a teacher role. There's no teacher assistants. We don't have time for that. We want to maximize the unique skill set each of us bring to the table. When we divide and conquer, it's important that not only do I know my skill set, but I'm able to use the skills that my colleague has taught me. So for instance, if I'm working with a teacher, I might ask her, how do you tell the children to make a circle? And she says, well, I say around and stop. Okay, great. I'm going to use around and stop when we're checking the checklist. How do you make an X? We say slide down, slide down. Okay, when I'm making an X with a checklist, I'm going to say slide down, slide down. We even go through skills such as how do you say to do the magic coat trick in which you flip the coat over the head? And they might say, I do 1, 2, flip-a-roo. Now, normally I say hands in the hose over the nose. But I'm going to say 1, 2, flip-a-roo. And the occupational therapist thought, I have magic hands. I have hands in which I can teach children to do that no one else can do. You need to get a master's degree in order to do that. You're not putting your hands on the students. However, what I do is the occupational therapist teaches me, how do you say every letter? How do you give instruction for them to write every number? How do you do that with shapes? I make little signs in the therapy room so that I'm saying what they're saying in therapy. Their first words are line down because they've heard me say it, they've heard their teacher say it, they've heard the occupational therapist say it, they've had that repetition, 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 repetition while they're multimodally doing it. That's what makes it really, really powerful. Movement is powerful. What is their first word? Maybe it's not mom or dad or anything like that. It's line down. That'll be their first word. And that's not by accident. It's a multimodal hands-on learning experience. You've got the fingers moving, which are very much connected to the mouth, some complex fine motor going on. And those are oftentimes the very first words we hear. What we want to do is you want to teach your colleagues the strategies. The colleagues I work with, I share with them all of the multimodal cues that we're going to do. We go through them and I tell them, I want you to modify it how you see fit. Because if you don't buy into the cue, they won't buy into either. Whatever cue you use that you can use with gusto, that you can you're feeling it, that's what they're going to pick up. And what we found in our research is if the graduate assistants that I work with, if they're using different multimodal cues than I am, we're still getting great gains with me working with them 50% of the time and the graduate assistant working with them the other 50% of the time, doing something different. Because I always knew that the graduate student needed to own their gestures. They needed to feel those gestures in their heart in order for the student to learn it. So it would show up in their facial expressions, it would show up in their voice, whether they're into their gesture or whether they're not into it. It doesn't matter that their gesture is totally different than mine. It matters whether or not they buy into it. If they don't buy into the gesture they're using, whether it's a speech gesture, a language gesture, a direction gesture, the children won't either. That's the secret. That's what we're going to do is co-teach and conquer. That is number 5. So those are the 5 steps. If you are a SIS member, I promise you, I will have this training workshop by next week. So you can use this workshop and share it with your colleagues, and you guys can decide how are we going to go and make something small. Make our once a week 20-minute movement group. How are we going to do that? And I'm going to give you the step by steps so that you can go ahead and put it in place. And then what you're going to do is you're going to DSD. It'll evolve over time. You are going to take your children, your back porch, your colleagues, which are different than mine, and you're going to modify it to make it fit into your world. But I think what is so important is that I'm not going to give you the abstract concepts. I'm not going to give you the little do's and don'ts tidbits that really give you a lot of common sense advice that everyone knows. Instead, I'm going to give you, if you focus on these, this is what's going to make it successful. And I've only learned that from all of my failures and all of my successes over the years and reading these mountains of research and reading all of these books. And you just have to tear it all down and then put it back together again. I'm very excited. I promise you that you will have that. I'll email that to the SIS members by next week. I can make this a year-long thing, but I know you need it in your hot hands right now. That said, I want you to go ahead, roll up your sleeves, and make the world a better place, one child at a time. You will always be first.